quite a while since I've published my last video. I'm sorry it took me so long. As you see, I'm in a completely new setting. We did move, we've been here for about a month and we've been settling in, so I feel like I can get back into my channel again. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you a cake from Italy called a mimosa cake, or Torta Mimosa. And if you're American, you might be thinking, oh, is this orange and champagne flavored? Because mimosas here, maybe it is like this elsewhere, but mimosas here are usually the name of a drink made with orange juice and champagne, or Prosecco. But this is actually, mimosa is referring to a flower that is used as a decoration for International Women's Day on March 8th in Italy. And it's a yellow flower, so the cake is made to look like it. So it has 2 layers of pan di Spagna, which is a type of an Italian sponge cake, and it's sandwiched together with pastry cream and chantilly cream. And then on top, in a really unique way, one of the layers of sponge cake is diced up and put on the outside of the cake to resemble the mimosa flower. So I hope you'll join me today, and I will show you how to make this really interesting Italian cake. Let's get started. This cake has pastry cream in it, so we need to start with that first so that it has time to chill. Add 500 milliliters or just over 2 cups of whole milk to a medium saucepan. Add the peel of 1 lemon and gently warm it just until it bubbles on the edges. You don't want to let it boil because then it'll form a skin after it cools down. When you're peeling the lemon, make sure you get as little of the white pith as possible because that will make the milk bitter. Once you've reached the little bubbles around the edges, turn off the heat and then strain out your lemon peel. And then to a separate bowl, you're going to add 4 egg yolks and whisk them together with 70 grams or 1/3 cup of sugar, and then whisk in 30 grams or 1/4 cup of cornstarch or potato starch. And when that's smooth and creamy and doesn't seem to have many sugar granules left in it, you're going to temper the eggs by adding the hot milk to them. Tempering is the process of slowly adding hot liquid to eggs so that when you cook them in the liquid, they don't curdle. Take a small ladle of the hot milk and very gradually add it into the eggs while whisking vigorously. And you'll see that I start with a couple of drips at a time and then gradually add it in faster as the eggs warm up. I usually add about 3/4 of a cup or 175 milliliters of the hot milk to the egg mixture when I'm tempering, but it really doesn't matter, just enough to warm it through. And then you're going to pour that mixture back into the pot with the rest of the milk. Once you add the mixture into the hot milk, continually whisk as you turn the heat on low to medium low, and as it heats up and as you whisk, it should thicken to a pudding-like consistency. Once it thickens up, you're going to let it bubble and burp and cook for another few minutes, and make sure to whisk often during this time so it doesn't burn. Then you're going to transfer the mixture to a bowl and you're going to stir in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Alternatively, if you'd like to use a vanilla pod, you would be adding the seeds from the vanilla pod into the milk when you steep the lemon rind in it at the first step instead of at the last step. The reason you add the vanilla extract last is because when vanilla extract gets hot, it tends to lose some of its flavor. So to keep that flavor, you want to add it at the end once it's been removed from the heat. Then you'll see here I've transferred the pastry cream to a shallow dish and covered it with plastic wrap on the surface. And you want that plastic wrap to completely touch the surface of the pastry cream so that a skin doesn't form while it cools down. And the reason I put it in a shallow dish is just so that when I put it in the refrigerator, it takes less time to chill through. While that's chilling, we're going to work on the cake layers. Add 6 eggs to a stand mixer with 260 grams or 1.5 cups of sugar and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. and then beat that on medium speed for 15 to 20 minutes. Yes, 15 to 20 minutes. So you'll definitely want to use a stand mixer for this. Even if you use the handheld electric mixer, you can do it that way, but you're going to be standing there for a really long time and your arm might get tired. So you'll want to beat the eggs until they reach a consistency called the ribbon stage. It's where they've gotten really pale yellow and really voluminous, and when you pick up the batter with a spoon and you drizzle it over the surface of the batter, it remains on the surface of the batter like a ribbon before it dissolves back into it. So that's what you're looking for here, and that's why it takes so long to beat the eggs in order to achieve that. While the eggs are mixing, I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this cake. Unlike so many European foods, this cake has a very traceable history. It was created in the 1950s in Rieti, Italy, by a chef named Adelmo Renzi. He created it for his restaurant, but it became famous in May 1962 when Renzi participated in a baking competition focusing on cakes. He presented the mimosa cake as an homage to the city he was originally from, San Filippo di Contigliano, known as the City of Flowers. He was asked why he made it, and he said, "I made a very simple dessert because the other pastry chefs had presented elaborate cakes, and my choice was rewarded by the jury. The mimosa was so popular that they immediately asked me for the recipe, but I never revealed it." So the popularity of this cake spread throughout, and it is still made today and is very well beloved by the Italian people. However, no one has ever made or used the original recipe because Renzi never revealed it. So how did the cake become associated with International Women's Day? Well, let's first take a look at the history of International Women's Day. The history is quite complex because it spans different political parties and different groups of women throughout different countries. But this one in particular that we're concentrating on today has roots in the communist and socialist movements of the early 20th century. The Second International Conference of Communist Women met in Moscow in 1921, and they established March 8th as International Working Women's Day. Vladimir Lenin then called for communists across the world to celebrate working women on March 8th, 1922, which is how it began in Italy with their Communist Party. There is a tradition that March 8th also marks the day when many women in a shirtwaist factory in New York City lost their lives due to fire brought on by poor working conditions. However, some sources claim that this dating is retroactive because the date that actually happened was March 25th. Regardless, International Women's Day became solidified in Italy, and in the 1940s, the Women's Union chose the mimosa flower to represent their cause because of how cheap and ubiquitous it was across the country. This holiday was officially signed into Italian law in the 1970s and remains a very popular observance to this day. The cakes became associated with this day simply because of their name and resemblance to the flower. Hence, you see them in bakeries throughout Italy at this time of year. At this time in history, March 8th is a day to celebrate the women in your life in Italy, and many people exchange mimosa flowers, sweets, and gifts. It has a bit of the same feel as a Mother's Day celebration. Now, as a quick aside, I'm here for the cake and the history, but not so much politics. However, I couldn't do this recipe justice without mentioning the holiday's socialist origins. So if you wouldn't mind keeping politics out of the comments, I would greatly appreciate it. Let's get back to our baking now. Once the eggs have reached the ribbon stage, set them aside briefly and sift together 130 grams or 1 cup of all-purpose flour with 130 grams or 1 cup of cornstarch or potato starch and a pinch of salt. You can also add half a teaspoon of ground turmeric to give the cake a nice yellow color to mimic the mimosa flower. I added it to mine, and you can't detect any turmeric flavor in the cake. It just makes it a nice golden yellow. Now you're going to very gently incorporate the dry ingredients into the egg mixture. and you're going to fold it in as gently as possible, 1 to 2 tablespoons at a time, until it's fully mixed together and there are no streaks of flour left. But gentle is the key word here. You want to keep all the volume in those eggs because that is all that is leavening this cake. There's no leavening agent like baking powder or baking soda in it. But you will see later in the video, I do discuss the option of adding a little bit of baking powder to the dry ingredients. You'll see that coming up when this first cake that I made didn't quite work out as I had expected. Now you're going to divide the batter in two, and you're going to pour it into 2 parchment-lined 8-inch cake pans. I actually only had one 8-inch pan and the other was 9-inch. Because one of these layers is going to be cut into cubes, I just divided it as evenly as possible and put about 2/3 of the batter into the 8-inch pan and the other third of the batter into the 9-inch pan, and that was the one I planned on using for just chopping into little pieces when I assembled the cake. With this type of cake batter, you want to not grease the sides of the pan because you want it to rise as high as possible, and greasing it could make it slip down. And to get out any air pockets, like big bubbles of air in the cake, instead of hitting the cake pans on the countertop like you would with other cakes, for this you're just going to swirl a toothpick through the batter to release any large air pockets, and this will keep the volume while popping any of those bubbles. Then you're going to bake them for about 40 minutes at 320 degrees Fahrenheit or 160 degrees Celsius. Then when the baking time is finished, prop the door of the oven open for about 10 minutes before removing them. This will help prevent them from collapsing when they reach the cool air of the kitchen. After about 10 minutes, remove them from the oven and cool them upside down on a cooling rack. This will help keep the volume as they cool, and you're going to let them completely cool in the pans. And while the cakes cool and I take a moment to wash the dishes and clean up the kitchen, I'd invite you to like the video if you've enjoyed it and learned something so far. And if you like videos like this and you haven't subscribed already, I'd invite you to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. I make videos sharing European baked goods and the history and traditions that go along with them. So if that's something you enjoy, I hope you'll stick around for more videos like this one. So today is actually the next day, and I'm going to start over and remake this. So it came out really rock hard. It's like, it feels like a sponge, and it just kind of like broke and fell out of the pan. This is kind of a classic problem to have with pan de Spagna. It is a notoriously difficult cake to make because you have nothing leavening it except for the eggs and all that air and volume that you put into them while you were mixing them. There is a little trick you can do. You could just cheat and add a little teaspoon of baking powder along with the rest of the ingredients. And while that is a little bit of a cheat, pan de Spagna purists would probably be angry at that. I'm going to do that because every time I make one of these cakes, it's very finicky for me. It either comes out or it absolutely fails. And I had this issue when I was making, a couple of years ago, I had a video for Swedish strawberry cake, and the cake sponge is made in a very similar way to this. And I just ended up adding a little bit of baking powder and it totally solved all the problems. So you could work to get the skill of being able to make the perfect pure pan de Spagna that's authentic from Italy with 0 baking powder, or you could just make it a little bit easier on yourself and add that little bit of baking powder just so that it ensures that you're not wasting eggs and all of your time and the recipe turns out. So I'll leave that totally up to you on how you want to do that in your kitchen. But for me here, I'm gonna add a little bit of baking powder just to ensure that this second batch turns out perfectly. So once I rebaked those cakes and they completely cooled, I started on the soaking syrup for the cake. Add 125 milliliters or half a cup of water to a small saucepan and 2 tablespoons of sugar. and bring it to a boil and then simmer until the sugar is dissolved, and this should only take a minute or two. Then to cool it down, you're going to pour it into a bowl and stir it and let it cool to just about warm, about body temperature, and then you're going to add in some flavoring. It's traditional to add some kind of liqueur. You can add limoncello for a lemon flavor. You can add strega, which is an Italian liqueur that's made from herbs. I didn't have access to strega, so I subbed in French chartreuse, the yellow version. There's a green version and a yellow version. The yellow version is a little bit milder on the herbal flavor. This is a French herbal liqueur. Hopefully someday I can find the strega where I live, or maybe hopefully purchase it in Italy. I'd love to try it, but I've heard that this is an acceptable substitute. You can also use Grand Marnier for an orange flavored cake. Now you're going to whip 450 milliliters or 2 cups of heavy cream and add in 60 grams or 5 tablespoons of powdered sugar. And you're going to be using this to lighten up that pastry cream to make the filling for the cake. Once you have your chantilly cream finished, remove the chilled pastry cream from the fridge and whisk it in a bowl to lighten it up, and then fold the chantilly cream into it in thirds until no streaks of pastry cream remain. When you're finished with that, cover it with plastic wrap and place it back into the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. Now you're going to prepare the cake layers. Remove one of the cakes from the pan and gently remove the outer crust of the cake. For me, it was easy to pull off with my fingers, but you may need to use a serrated bread knife for this. Try to just take a very thin layer off. You want to leave most of the cake. If you don't get every little piece, it's not a big deal. You're just removing it so that the soaking syrup can soften the cake. Then you're going to cut the cake into 3 layers. This might seem like a difficult task, but it's not too hard if you follow these tricks. You need to take a long serrated bread knife and you need to just skim the edges of the cake with the bread knife and turn your rack or whatever your cake is on at the moment, turn it in a circle as you move that cake. And just go deeper and deeper until you get to the center of it, and you should have a pretty even cake layer. It might not be 100% perfect, but for the most part, this should give you an even cake layer. And you're going to do that twice to give yourself a total of 3 cake layers. And you obviously don't have to have special tools for making this cake. However, I have found over the years that cake making is much easier if you just buy yourself a couple of inexpensive tools. One of those tools is this layer picker-upper. I don't even know the real name for it. But I'll link one in the description box below. They're not expensive, but they are so convenient for being able to place a cake layer on and then later on transferring that cake layer on top of the cake that you're assembling. And they're not pricey. It's just these things that you don't think of buying until the moment that you need them. If you don't have one and you're making this cake right now, then just take these cake layers and very gently set them on another flat surface. Then take your most stable looking cake layer and put that on the bottom. And this is another little tool that I love having. These are cake turntables for decorating cakes. They're also not expensive. I believe when I bought this several years ago, this was only $16. I mean, I'm sure they're more expensive now, but I will link 1 or 2 below, and I definitely recommend picking one up sometime. They're so convenient because you can spin them as you frost and layer your cake. So you're going to put the first layer down, and then you're going to soak the bottom layer with that sugar syrup with the alcohol in it. And if you don't want to use alcohol or for yourself, or if you're making this for children, one thing the Italians do for children is they replace the alcohol with orange juice or pineapple juice. So you're going to put the sugar syrup on each layer, and then you're going to put a third of the pastry cream mixed with the chantilly cream on between each layer, and then you're going to top it with that final layer, soak that with syrup again, and then you're going to take the rest of the cream and you're going to put it all around the cake as if you're frosting it, so on the sides and on the top. And you'll see here I'm pressing down just to give it more of a flat shape, and it just helps to sandwich all the layers together. Don't squeeze too hard though, you don't want to break the cake or make the cream ooze out the sides. So you'll see I'm just putting that last bit of soaking syrup on it, and then I'm going to frost the cake with the rest of the cream. Another invaluable tool are these offset spatulas. They can really give you a beautiful finish that looks really professional on buttercream and things like that if you're frosting a cake and want to give it a really polished look. For this cake, however, it really doesn't matter. You can be pretty rustic with it because you're going to be covering all of this cream with pieces of cake. So you don't need to get fancy and perfect with this cake. You're just going to be putting it on the top and then putting it along the sides and just making it as even as you can, but it really doesn't have to be lump free or look flat and perfect. Now it's time for the fun part. You're going to take that last cake layer that you haven't touched yet, and you're going to remove the crust and then chop it into little 1/2-inch pieces, and you're just going to arrange it on the tops and sides of the cake. You're going to want to take your hand and just gently press it into the cream so that it sticks, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Like I said, this is a rustic look. You're just trying to make the cake look like a mimosa flower. So just put your cake pieces along the side, press them, and if you find any spots that the cream is sticking out and it's bare, then just take a little piece and fill it in as you go. Then I highly recommend, before eating this cake, that you let it sit in the refrigerator overnight. All of the soaking syrup and the cream will soak into each of the cake layers, and it will soften it and just kind of create a really nice cohesive slice of cake, and it'll just make it creamier and more enjoyable to eat. So you can eat this the same day, nothing wrong with that, but I do think chilling it and letting it sit overnight really does improve the flavor and the texture of it. And surprisingly, this cake lasts quite a few days. So if you need to make it 1 or 2 days in advance, you can totally do that. I'm really looking forward to see what I think of this. Let's give it a try. Really like that. I was fully expecting to actually dislike this because I'm not a big fan of the taste of herbal liqueurs, and I tasted the chartreuse before I put it in, and it has a very distinct, almost sort of an acquired taste to it. And so when I didn't think it would pair well with a dessert, but it's actually very subtle and adds a little bit almost of like a floral hint to the flavor of the cake. And like I said in the video, you don't have to flavor it with that if you don't have access to it or if you don't like it. You can use limoncello for a lemon flavored cake, or you can use Grand Marnier for an orange flavored cake. Or if you can find the Italian Strega, which I couldn't find in my local liquor stores. That is an herbal liqueur that's similar to chartreuse, but it has a little bit more of a mint and fennel aftertaste. And so that would add a very interesting flavor to this as well. And then if you don't want to use alcohol, or if you're making it for children, it's common in Italy to soak the layers with orange juice or pineapple juice. That would be a really delicious cake too. Honestly, this is perfect for the coming warmer months as we get into spring and summer, because it has like a light, fresh feel to it. I really like this. So if you love cream cakes, you'll love this. So I highly recommend giving this a try. And let me know, have you ever made pan de Spagna before? Have you had the troubles that I have, where sometimes it comes out perfectly and other times it just fails because you don't get those eggs whipped perfectly? Do you add baking powder to your pan de Spagna? Or do you find that horrifying and not authentic at all? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you again for your patience with my channel as we moved and settled in. I'm hoping that I can get back into a filming and a publishing routine. So I thank you for your patience as I get back into things. And if you want a cake that's similar to this and perfect for the coming warmer months, I highly recommend my Swedish strawberry cake. It is made with a very similar cake, very similar to pan de Spagna, and it has 3 layers with cream and strawberries in between. So I highly recommend that one if this one looked good to you. Watch that one next, and I'll see you next time.